All right, guys, you are in for a treat today. Really, actually, I'm in for a treat because you know my obsession with declassified CIA documents. Obviously, this year, I have made that book Chaos required reading for any person that is watching this podcast. I mean, learning the truth about the CIA, it will rip you into a new reality about our government. What is real? Operation Mockingbird, MK Ultra. Well, today I have a guest who was in the CIA, became a whistleblower. I'm not sure how he's alive. I'm going to ask him, but it is our great and distinct honor to welcome Kevin Shipp to the Candace Show. Kevin,
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me.
I feel bad for you because this is like, I'm just going to lock you in here and ask you so many questions right off the bat.
That's fine.
First, I'll just ask a question I think that a lot of people probably want to know. Very softball question. How does one become a CIA analyst? Do they call you after you place high on your SATs?
In some cases they do,
Okay.
and they recruit out of some of the Ivy League colleges. In my case, I had a friend who was in there. I didn't know it because he was undercover, was encouraging me to put in an application, and his name was Dana. And I said, Dana, that's not going to happen, not with my checkered and shaded college past, drugs and alcohol and all. And he said, well, just try it anyway. And I said, okay. So I filled it out, 171, gave it to him, and just blew it off. That's the end of that. And I get a call. This is Kevin Shipp. Yes, this is Mr. X at the CIA. You've applied for employment here? I said, yeah. He goes, would you like to continue with your application process? And I said, sure.
How old were you at the time?
I was, let's see, at that time, I was 27 years old. And they said, okay, then we'll continue. Thank you. I said, okay, wait till they do my background investigation, talk to my college friends, Then I get phone calls from my buddies. Two guys in a suit knocked at our door. They were FBI and they're asking questions about you. And I'm like, well, surprised that didn't happen in college. But anyway, they weren't FBI. They were somebody else. So I knew that they were out there checking on me, and I was still convinced, nah, I'll never make it. And then I get another call, Kevin Shipp. We are still interested in your application. Would you like to come into CIA headquarters for an interview? I was like, okay. So I go to CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, walk in there into the main building. They badge me with the visitor badge. I sit there. Lady in a business suit comes out. She goes, you Kevin Shipp? I said, yeah. She goes, follow me. So I go down this long corridor with combination locks on all the doors. And at the end is this one doorway that's open. And sitting behind the desk is this silver-haired guy up in this big desk. And this is back where you could smoke in CIA office buildings. And he's just chain smoking away. And he goes, Kevin, have a seat. So I sit in the chair, and of course, I sunk down, and so his desk is way up here. I'm like, okay, I know what's going on here. He goes, Kevin, I got one question for you. I said, yes, sir. He goes, you ever broken the law? I'm like, okay, that's the end of this. I said, I'd become a Christian at that point, so I tried to tell the truth the best I could. I said, yes, sir, I have. He goes, well, why don't you tell me about it? So I went through this long litany of drug use and climbing to the top of radio towers and all this crazy stuff we did in college. And when I was done, I was like, oh, well, I told the truth. He takes a drag off his cigarette, blows out his nose, and he goes, I got no problem with that. You want to continue? I'm like, yeah. So anyway, went to the polygraph, and I did the same thing in the polygraph and told them all my.
Oh, wow. So they immediately then take you into a polygraph.
Well, it was about a month after that. They like you to stew. So
as they're watching you.
As they're watching you. So each interview was about almost 3 months apart for a total of 6 months.
Okay, and then one more question. What were you actually doing as your career at that time?
I was a starving biologist.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a biologist. My minor was in microbiology, and I decided I want to find a new career. That I'm not made to be in a laboratory. So that's why Dana had me turn in the application. And so they would call you and they'd wait 3 months to kind of let you stew, and next call I get, Kevin Shipp. Yeah, this is Mrs. X. You have made it this far in your process. Would you like to come in for a polygraph test? And I said, okay. It said, come into headquarters such and such a time and date. And they'll send me to an outer building. They do these in an outer, non-discrete outer building. And they said, on such and such a date. So I walk in there, sit there with all these people that are in the chairs, just frozen, about to take their CIA polygraph. They called me back, and I sat down in the chair, and they wired me up with all the wires, the electrodermal plates and everything, and started asking me questions. And of course, the first one was, Kevin, you ever broken the law? And I was like, okay. And he was like, anything else? No. And then they get into drugs and they get into alcohol. And later on, at the end of my tour, I became a polygraph examiner. So I knew, much of it is trickery. It's not as much, the instrument is really important, but it's the skill of the examiner and how they ask questions, and they do it in a specific way. So they'll ask mundane questions, and then they'll hit you with the big one and see how you react to the big one. So anyway, I got out of there in 2 hours, which I understood later was a good thing, and got my call. You're hired, work for the CIA, report to CIA headquarters such and such a date for my big briefing, and I was in. You have no idea a lot of times what you're going to be doing until you get in there, which I certainly didn't.
So you were just shocked. Here you are, a biologist.
Yeah, and
dealing with test tubes and making no money, and now you're like, actually, now you work for the Central Intelligence Agency.
Yeah, and maybe they liked my check.
Married at the time?
No, I was married at the time. Let's see, I was 27, so I was married at the time. Yes, and of course, my wife couldn't know anything about. Once I got in there and found out what I was going to do. You go through your first briefing. I wound up being one of these briefers, but everybody's sitting out there from secretaries to military liaison generals in this big audience, and then they tell them what the CIA is all about, and everybody goes, whoa, whoa, and they tell you how special you are, and you're the 2%, and that's when they start working on you. Nobody's like you, and we chose you because you're special, and that's part of how they mess with your mind and get you to kind of be super loyal and test you to see what you'll do later. So anyway, I went through that. Then I started in what was called their Security Protective Service. They had just instituted a brand new program where they would train federal law enforcement officers at FLETC, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. And the CIA would bring them in, get them a clearance. They would be licensed federal police officers, and then they would do secret things for the police inside CIA headquarters and buildings. So I started there. And then
what sorts of secret things?
Well, protect the way the statement is, the Security Protective Service protects CIA personnel and facilities. And that means a lot, especially overseas. If you're protecting personnel overseas, you're involved in operations, live or die, which I wound up doing. And so within, 8 months, I was promoted to be a protective agent on the protective detail of William Casey when he was director of the CIA. And all the way up until he had his seizure and was taken to Georgetown University Hospital. And then I was one of the agents in the hot seat outside of his hospital room while he was terminally ill. And that's when Bob Woodward claims he got in, which is a fabrication, because we caught him and showed him the door. He never got in there.
Wow.
And it's in his book, Veil, Secret Wars of the CIA. It's a complete fabrication.
Wow.
Yeah. So then I went on to the counterespionage group. There was a mole in the CIA, and I was in a special unit searching for that mole inside the CIA. Then from there, I went and became a member of what would be the CIA's version of a Tier 1. They won't let me say the exact name of the detail. They want me to call it an anti-terrorism assault team. So we were sent overseas against the New People's Army terrorist group that were massacring police departments. They were surveilling embassy people. They'd killed a bunch of Marines, and we were sent over there to stop that from happening.
Which country? Are you allowed to say?
No.
Okay.
And so they said this could be a one-way mission. So we all took out life insurance, and I had a close call with a terminal illness when I was a kid, so I wasn't really afraid of much, So they asked for volunteers, and only a few raised their hands. And then we went through cut after cut after cut through this intense training with counter assault team training and hostage training and all this stuff. And
so now you're learning to shoot, or had you already?
You're learning tactical shooting. We had to qualify in 5 different weapon systems. We went through really intense counterterrorism driver training. We're in the dark. We're driving down a track at 80 miles an hour with a car ramming us from behind, an instructor screaming obscenities right in our face, and we had to make a 90-degree turn and do it successfully, or we are off the team. So
okay, I want to pause here, because you are saying all this stuff like it's super casual, and now I feel like I'm listening to the audio of a James Bond flick. Okay, so because this is incredible. So they come to you, and you've got this counterterrorism team, and they ask who would like to volunteer for this. By the way, you might die.
Yeah.
Because you've said that sort of casually, whatever, I'll do that. Yeah. But they basically were like, take out some life insurance.
Absolutely.
You're married at the time.
Yes.
And you volunteer because you're a madman, I presume. But you did say also because you had dealt with a terminal illness when you were younger.
And I wasn't afraid of dying, yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
what was the terminal illness? What were you
I was diagnosed with what's called bilateral hydronephrosis when I was 12 years old, and essentially both of my kidneys had burst, and I was just going to the bathroom and nothing but blood was coming out. So they rushed me to Fairfax Hospital, and kidneys were gone. It was just a mass of blood, and they gave me 6 weeks to live. And uh, uh, my mom, who was an agnostic, had a friend named Sue Barton, wonderful lady, and she had a prayer group. And that little prayer group of ladies, believed that God still heals from the Bible. And so they prayed and prayed and prayed. I didn't know this. They prayed. And I remember I was in the hospital. And of course, I was feeling horrible. I was in there for 30 days at that point, and I was their poster child, because I wasn't supposed to make it. And then all of a sudden, I started just feeling healthy for the first time in a long time. And I remember sitting up telling the nurse, open the window, let the sunshine come in. She's like, okay. They took me back down and x-rayed my sides, and both my kidneys were back. And this is in Fairfax County, records,
miracle?
Fairfax County Hospital, yeah. And so after that, I knew something really remarkable had happened. And after my college years, I finally was smart enough to find faith when I started looking into it to get through my thick head. And then I became a very sincere Christian after that.
So then, so this is why you don't have this fear of death. Yeah.
Right.
So you're
Right.
a dedicated Christian. You're like, all right,
Yes.
this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go overseas. I'm going to join this counterterrorism unit.
Mhm.
And you go through this intense training.
Mhm.
You get over there, and I assume you don't die.
Nope, I sure didn't.
You didn't die.
And it's funny the way that it works, because the CIA is such a mind game that I went native for about 5 years, and I became them, out collecting human intelligence in the field through assets and trying to penetrate governments and things. And what that does, and drinking with the enemy, and what that does to your moral compass is just not good. And so for 5 years, I was kind of one of them, although I was a Christian, I was still a Christian, but backslidden would probably be a
So
good
your
word.
job was to be dishonest.
My job was to steal, to lie, to drink with the foreigners, and I would take mental notes as I was extracting information. We'd get them real drunk, take them out and get them to talk, and then I'd memorize everything they said, and then take coded notes when I got back to the hotel, and then smuggle those back to agency and write reports, and I got a award for that. So I did a lot of that, and it was dirty work. The James Bond image, when you get out and actual case officer work, it's more snakely, I would say.
But you've, of course, you've gone through the propaganda of the training. Like
Oh, yeah,
you're
absolutely.
You're a part of
Oh,
the
yeah, it's a
few, and you're-
mind-messing organization, absolutely. And the defining moment, which kind of opened my eyes, is we were on the border of the Soviet Union. KGB was everywhere. We were followed. We had a KGB officer that followed us everywhere. We called him Boris. And I left the hotel one day to go up to this little mall and get something to eat in the hotel. And this lady comes up to me and she goes, "Hi, sir. Would you like to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ?" Excuse me. And I pushed her away, and I said, "No, thank you." And I took about 4 steps, and I was like, "My God, what has happened to me?" I went back to the hotel room. I was like, "I can't do this anymore." And went back to headquarters, and because I'd gotten some good human intelligence and done some good operations, I got a call from the division chief. "We want you to come and do this, collecting human intelligence in the field for the rest of your career. This is an offer that nobody refuse. You can't refuse this." And I used to come home and take a bath, to go to church to take a soul bath, after what I'd just done. And I loved my kids and my family more than anything. So I told him on the phone, I said, "Sir, thank you so much for the offer, but I'm not interested. I'm going to have to turn it down." He goes, "What? Your career with this agency is over if you turn this down." I said, "Well, yeah, yes, sir. If that's the case, then that's the case." He goes, "It's over for you." Click. He hangs up the phone. And I'm like, "Okie dokie." I walked out of my office, and I can't mention his name, but he's a real well-known figure, was now with the CIA. And I walked out, my head kind of hanging. And he comes out and puts his arm around me, and he goes, and excuse my French here, but he goes, "Hey, Kevin." I said, yeah, I'm feeling kind of down. I just got really hammered. And he goes, "It's about time somebody told those bastards no." I'm like, "That helps."
Yeah.
So, and in the context of my career, I uncovered this vulnerability. I was put on an assignment looking at computer system connections between the CIA and some of our allied intelligence agencies. And as I was doing an investigation, I uncovered a vulnerability where it appeared that any foreign intelligence service, any terrorist organization could go into the visa section of an embassy where they're just open computers and go into that computer, into the system in the embassy and identify our covert agents, chief of staffs, and by extension, their assets. And at first I was like, my gosh, how can this be? So I investigated further and dug, and it turned out that it looked like, yes, you can do this. So I contacted the office division in the CIA responsible. I said, look, I think this can be done. And they're like, we doubt it. And I said, well, let me send my report over to you and you can give it to the division chief and let him look at it, just see what he thinks. So I sent it through internal CIA mail. I call a week later, did you get my report? What report? I said, the one I sent you through internal mail. No, we didn't get any report. So I said, okay, I'll send it again. So I sent it again, waited a week, called him. Okay, did you get it this time? What report? I'm like, what the heck is going on here? The one I sent you. No, we don't remember any report. I said, all right, I'm going to come over to your office in CIA headquarters and I'm going to give you the report over your desk. So I did that. I traveled to CIA headquarters with the report, walked up into the office. There was the division chief's executive aide. And I said, ma'am, here's the report. I think he needs to look at this. And she kind of bristled and said, okay, I'll give it to him. Week later, I called. Did the chief get a chance to read my report? She goes, I don't remember any report. I'm like, ma'am, the one I just handed you over your desk, I don't remember that. We don't remember any report. Then I went into the CIA server in headquarters and they had erased my report from the CIA server. And I was like, what on earth is going on here? You would think that they'd want to know about this and do something.
Their guys don't get killed.
So guys don't get killed. Yeah. And then I get a call from this division chief in a menacing tone, Kevin Ship. I'm like, this is so-and-so from Clearance Protection Division, I'll call it. I said, yes, sir. He goes, I'm ordering you to drop this investigation and drop it now or else it's your career. I'm like, but sir, he goes, no, I'm ordering you to stop it. Click. And okay, what do I do then? Well, it turns out that my immediate boss, I'll call Jack, leaked my report to the Department of State Senior Inspector General's office. Former decorated CI officer was now one of the leaders in their staff. And I get this phone call on the secure line. Kevin, this is Jim so-and-so. And I knew who he was. I mean, he's very well respected in the agency. I said, yeah, yes, sir. He goes, listen, we got a copy of your report and we think there may be a concern here. So I said, yeah, I think so too. And he goes, would you come over to State and brief us? And I said, certainly. So I went over to Department of State, briefed the IG, and they looked at it and they said, yeah, this is concerning. Let us look at this and then we'll get back to you. So I go back to my desk in this outer building. I get a call from Jim. He goes, Kev, this looks serious. We're going to do a global investigation of this and see if this is really happening. Do not tell the CIA what you're doing or what we're doing. Keep this secret. You'll hear from us in about 3 months. So I was like, goodness, okay. 3 months, I get a call on a secure line, and it's Jim. He goes, Kevin, we need you to come over to State. It's worse than even you thought. I said, yes, sir. He goes, could you be at State this Friday at such and such time? I said, yes, sir. So I went over there and the IG guys buzzed me in on the upper floor and I walk in and there's Jim and the two IG guys. They said, come on back to the conference room. I walk into this room, this long walnut conference room. And I sit on one side of the table, Jim on the other, two IG guys at the end. And they said, the CIA will be here in just a moment. I'm like, ooh, I didn't know the CIA was coming to this. So we wait. There's a buzz on the door. The door opens, and in walks the division chief of this cover protection division.
Who told you, drop it?
Told me, the division that told me to drop it or else. And they said, have a seat at the end of the table, sir. And this is GS-15 CI official, and way above my head. He sat down at the end of the table. He didn't know why he was there. He was kind of nervous. And they said, consider this an official rebuke by the Department of State to the CIA for putting the lives of their covert agents at risk for over 10 years and then covering it up. consider this an official rebuke. And this report is going to go to the entire intelligence community, and they're all going to see what you've done. Well, blood just drained from his face. He got ashen white and froze and was shocked. It was like, uh-oh, we're busted. And they said, you can go now. So he gets up and he walks out, and I'm sitting there thinking, well, that's the end of me. That's the end of my career. And I remember going back to the CIA headquarters, walking through the main hallway, and it was, figuratively speaking, it was like I had a laser dot in my back. I knew they were coming for me. And eventually they wound up assigning me to a secret base where they did all kinds of dirty deeds and buried a bunch of stuff, and put me in a house that they knew was badly contaminated. The people in it before were very ill, and ordered me and my family into this house. And we all got terribly sick. My son's immune system was destroyed. The immunologist said it looked like he'd been exposed to a burst of radiation. My wife was bedridden, bruising all over her body, bleeding from her guns. She was in dementia, lost her short-term memory. The CIA was ordering me not to tell anybody about it. They wouldn't allow any medical tests, any environmental tests. Told me to keep it quiet. They wouldn't let me contact my supervisor back in Washington. And anyway, so it was bad. Then they broke into our house. You know, I was 2 steps ahead because I was them. So we were out of the house, and I put tape seals on all the doors and windows, and a little Radio Shack voice-activated tape recorder, you know, how technically advanced. I put it up in the silverware container, and then a little safety zone motion-activated siren while we were gone. And we get back, we go into the house, all 5 tape seals are broken. I turn on the tape recorder, and you can hear the door opening with a master key. Some rustling around, you can hear the alarm go off and then shut off immediately. They knew how to shut that thing off, and you had to kind of know what to do. And at that point, I'd filed a personal injury suit against the CIA because they were covering this thing up. And we went back into where it looked like most of the toxins were coming in. They were coming in from below and above. And there were big paintbrushes of invisible chemical the CIA had broken in and painted on the ceiling. They didn't know that I was using a black light, because that's how you can find a lot of toxins with black light. And I remember Clinton, and a courageous attorney, we were standing there, and I hit it with the black light, and he goes, "This is like 3 days at the Condor." I'm like, every time I think they're not going to do something, they do. Anyway, that led to me coming out and becoming a whistleblower, and then seeing what the CIA will do to whistleblowers and the perfected system. That's why you never hear about CIA whistleblowers. They have a perfected system of career destruction. If you talk about anything that you see that is criminal or illegal or whatever, to classify it, seal it, put it under the state secrets privilege, and they threatened me and my wife and kids with prison if we talked about the evidence I collected to anyone. And then that was it. That's it. So I wrote From the Company of Shadows, came out, went first, not knowing, to the Washington Post and said, "I'm a former CIA officer. I want to come out with this story." And the reporter was like, "Oh, okay, yeah." He started calling me, and over 30 days, I gave him the story, an unclassified story. Over 30 days, he kept calling and asking questions that required classified answers. And I wouldn't give them to him. This went on. Finally, I said, look, Charlie Savage at the New York Times wants this story. So if you're not going to do this and you keep this up, I'm going to give it to him. "No, please, my editor is on me to ask these questions." Well, guess who his editor was? Bob Woodward. Mockingbird poster child Bob Woodward. And it turns out that Post had gone straight to the CIA and reported my contact.
New estimates show that more than 1 million babies were killed by abortion in 2023, the highest number of abortions since 2012. We have to fight back against this evil, because when they shout abortion, we have to shout life. And how do we do that? We join hands with Preborn, the largest pro-life organization in the country that sponsors ultrasounds for clinics in the highest abortion areas. When a mother considering abortion meets her baby on ultrasound and hears the heartbeat, it doubles a baby's chance at life. Every day, Preborn rescues 200 lives, which is a true miracle. By the time I finish reading this ad, 2 more babies will have been taken by abortion. Just $28 could be the difference between life and death. So please join the fight by sponsoring 1, 2, 3, or 200 ultrasounds. All gifts are tax deductible. To donate, just dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. Again, that's pound 250 baby, or you can visit preborn.com/Candace. That's preborn.com/Candace. cia.com/Candace. Yeah, I don't think most people know this, and it's interesting now because I'm now realizing that I know nothing about history. And so many people think it was this brave thing that Bob Woodward did and was in contact with Deep Throat, but it was actually the state overthrowing Nixon. Like the deep state overthrew Nixon. They wanted him out, and then they wanted to make it seem like it was this like heroic thing to the public.
That's
And
right.
so actually Nixon was a victim of the deep
That is
state,
correct.
just like JFK was before him. And so realizing that Bob Woodward, his claim to fame is, I had a source. Yeah, your source was the CIA that was trying to radically oust a president, stage a coup, essentially. So you realize then at that point, and by the way, just to slow this down, I know people that watch this already know about Operation Mockingbird, but it is really one of the most crucial ones to understanding the mainstream media web. The CIA puts this into place and quite literally just puts journalists on the CIA payroll to be able to control the information that's getting out to the public after JFK gets shot. They're worried about what's going to happen. The public is asking too many questions, so they just want journalists to all say the exact same thing. And we still see this today. There was no discontinuation of Project Mockingbird. So you make the mistake of going, there must be a noble media member at the Washington Post.
That was all in the past.
Yeah,
it doesn't continue today. Well,
and what year is this, by the way?
What's that?
What year is this that you're dealing with?
Let's see, that would be 2012.
Okay.
And then that's when I wrote From the Company Shadows. So yeah, and then I started experiencing firsthand other major publishers, when I wrote From the Company of Shadows, no, we can't touch that. We don't want to make the CIA mad. And the CIA had threatened a lot of journalists and a lot of publishers, don't touch anything against the CIA. So they were all terrified. And plus, the editors of the Washington Post is one of the founders of Mockingbird, Philip and Catherine
New York
Grant.
Times.
What's that?
One of the highest paid.
New York Times, yes. Time Magazine. They had more than 400 reporters and news anchors on CIA payroll when Operation Mockingbird started. And now they operate two ways. A journalist with any major news media or news periodical knows that if they do a real investigative piece on the CIA, they're done. I mean, their editors tell them that many editors have a quid pro quo with the CIA not to report negatively on the CIA. And there's some major news organizations that people watch that have that relationship. And so if they say anything negative about the CIA will stop feeding them stories so that they can get the first scoop and cut them off. And that's going on right now with several well-known news organizations. And I mentioned the one with the CIA lapel pin. So clearly going on. Then this last administration, thank God, which is out the back door, started what's called the Trusted News Initiative, where the CIA signed an agreement, or the Associated Press, the Washington Post, of course, and all four social media companies in the Trusted News Initiative signed an agreement with the DNI and the CIA not to censor certain pieces of information on all social media and in their reporting. Literally signed an agreement not to do that. Now, when you sign a CIA agreement, especially if there's money involved, they'll put you under a non-disclosure agreement with a threat of prison if you talk about anything you're not supposed to talk about. And that's how the CIA controls journalists. That's why there are no whistleblowers until recently, because of the NDA. You come out and you talk about this, you're going to prison. You sign a secrecy agreement as an officer, never to put anything out without the CIA approving it, which means they'll redact or black out the entire thing, which they did in my first book. And sit on it for a year or two. That's what they do every single time. And some of that's in the book. It's
really compelling to consider that you did what you thought was an act of service, trying to rescue the lives of other CIA servicemen. Report this, hey, this must be by accident that we have this exposure to them, that people can access their information via visa application, whatever it is. And this resulted in you being poisoned. Like they were just going to poison you and your family because how dare you? And it was a direct order. Of course, my mind is instantly running. Why would they not want to deal with that? Of course, if they realize that CIA servicemen can be killed. And then, of course, my mind then instantly goes to, because they kind of wanted them to get killed so they could, declare an act of war against whatever target it is. They killed somebody in the CIA, and this is their favorite, a remarkable intelligence failure. They were somehow able to access the information by accident. We had no idea.
Exactly.
But in reality, they wanted these people to be harmed.
Why would they not take care of something that clearly put their agents' lives at risk, why would they leave it there to the point of covering it up, threatening me and then taking the report off the CIA server, unless they wanted that vulnerability there to use if there was say a chief of station who wasn't playing by the book, or they wanted to plausible denial for some operation that went bad, to blame, how it happened. And that's the only logical conclusion.
I just think of false flags. It's like somebody gets hurt and then you say, you had no idea how this happened, and now we have to retaliate because our guys are getting killed, or somebody high up got killed. And of course we're going to defend, the homeland. And this is something that people are asking all the time, like, how many false flag attacks have there been where they allowed these remarkable security failures to happen?
Several.
A lot.
Several. From, goodness gracious, from the Vietnam War with the Gulf of Tonkin, that was a false flag. The Vietnamese ships on the radar attacking, those were fake. The CIA added those on the radar that they gave to Congress. The Vietnam War was started by a false flag. And look at 50,000 American soldiers died, and 1 million Vietnamese civilians died because of that. And then you go to Iraq, the false intelligence from Iraq. 500,000 Iraqi civilians, 2,500 U.S. troops were killed, and 200,000 U.S. service personnel were badly injured because of false intelligence from the CIA.
Remarkable intelligence failure.
Yeah.
Even Pearl Harbor, they had warnings of it happening that they chose to ignore. I was watching this whole documentary on it, and I was like, oh, okay. It was just a remarkable intelligence failure. They heard that it was going to happen, and then it happened, and then what do you know? We're in World War II. And this just really gets into the military-industrial complex, because they need to make sure that the public is on their side. And that is why this book, Chaos, blew my mind. To think that the Charles Manson murders, which fundamentally changed, people were so traumatized by how graphic these murders were. And to know the CIA was there that night. I mean, what that Tom O'Neill uncovered, and almost he dedicated his whole life to it. He was flat broke and just filing FOIA requests for years, realizing that the public thought that Charles Manson just hypnotized some people to do these crazy things. But in reality, everything we know about the Manson murders, this guy was MK Ultra. He was trained by the government. And this was an order for people to just end the hippie dream. They wanted to go to war. The hippies were to love rock and roll. And this, leading up to the Vietnam War, LBJ, bloodthirst, Vietnam, Cambodia. It's incredible the lengths they will go through to get the public on the side of war. And
it's extremely upsetting.
And then even in that, back in the 60s, that was a pretty much Project Mockingbird, because he explained how all the press then was writing every minute, every detail, because they wanted to traumatize the press. And these moments are traumatizing. Pearl Harbor, traumatizing. I always go back to my propaganda as a child in school, 9/11. And now I think back at it, I'm going, oh my gosh, just the words they use, and they don't want to think about anything but the emotion of it, right? Like, and so we get in line and we go, okay, yeah, no, we're totally okay with establishing TSA and giving up all of our freedoms in order for us to stay safe.
Gutting the Constitution.
Because all they're doing is showing us these images and talking about terrorism. And I was in the classroom and they're telling us, in order to be safe, to keep you safe, and then we have to go to war, and we can't just quickly say war in Iraq is okay. Don't even ask questions, even though there were Saudis in the plane. All it takes is something very traumatizing to happen, Operation Mockingbird in full effect, and you can, in most instances, get the public to be persuaded to go into a war, a conflict that they know nothing about.
You nailed it. You nailed it. Yes, and in terms of 9/11, I taught criminal investigations at a college, and I did investigations, obviously, espionage investigations. In the agency, a criminal investigation was never done on 9/11. They automatically blamed it on terrorism. They didn't examine any of the evidence. As a matter of fact, they bust out all of the iron and steel on barges to China the next day. And they made these ridiculous, and when they do their propaganda, it seems so stupid on its face, but they repeat it so many times. For example, well, we can prove that it was such and such hijacker that flew the plane in the building because we found his passport laying on E Street.
So stupid.
What? Let's see. The plane was incinerated. The floor above and below the plane were incinerated. There was absolutely nothing left of the
recover bodies.
The building was powder. But amazingly, they found this passport that proved their narrative. Oh, and
So
there's more.
this year, we did a 2-episode series on 9/11 to go backwards because I was a
Yeah.
child, and to show people, we found these old clips and showed them. Do you realize how much we were lied to about 9/11? Like, it's just unbelievable when you look back at everything they told.
Astounding.
Astounding. And then the things that they ignored that happened that day, and the presence of the Mossad that was there, and they just never really answered the question, and just kind of
Tower 7.
Tower 7 was very clearly just dropped to the. Come on.
You cannot explain that away.
I mean, and then when you learn even more, which I didn't even show on the show, about the art students that were there, that were also
Yeah.
intelligence
Israeli art
agents.
students, and
And
then
the weeks leading up, just like
it's
it's
what
like,
a coincidence.
what a coincidence.
And I did some research on plane crashes, as I'm sure many of your viewers have. And every single plane crash, especially a large aircraft, there's always wreckage left of the parts that can't be blown apart. The landing gear and the engines specifically. A lot of times the nose cone. Well, Shanksville, Pennsylvania, no wreckage whatsoever. The Pentagon, there were no engines. There were none of the landing gear. Nothing.
And yet there were servicemen around that said, I've served in active military. It was a missile. I can tell you the sound of a missile. And they ignored all of this. And then we even pulled an old clip of a CNN journalist who was on the ground that day and said, I got up close, there's no plane. And they just kind of tried to wipe this from the internet.
Yeah.
And so we had to dig up this. I'm like, you had a CNN journalist who was just probably telling the truth. And was like, I'm here. This is amazing. Like, I got up close. There's no plane.
Yeah.
And you just see this perfect hole. And then you have all of these people who have been in active military zones who said, I heard a missile that day. They don't release, they classify images of the plane
videotape from the
until
gas station.
2000, and who knows when Tom Fitton and Judicial Watch was finally able, and you can't see anything.
Yeah.
It's like, what hit the Pentagon that day?
Yeah, just directly.
And then they call us conspiracy theorists.
Yeah.
Which is a part of Operation Mockingbird. The CIA created that.
The CIA
term.
created that, and I've got a copy of that memo. People calling people conspiracy theorists. Well, let's just change that and call it conspiracy investigators. How about that? Which is what we need these days, you know. So,
what do you mean you got a memo of conspiracy theorists?
there's a memo where finally a Freedom of Information Act request was answered, and they gave a memo where the CIA said, responding to the JFK assassination, we need to respond to the conspiracy theories that are out there about this shooting. And that's where the conspiracy theory label came from, was from that memo. And that's used to be an easy out to brand somebody a conspiracy theorist to avoid the facts, like 9/11. There needs to be a criminal investigation despite the destruction of evidence of 9/11. There never was. And in the book, Alvin Buzzy Krongard, who ordered the CIA IG to silence and destroy me because of what was on that base, or dirty tricks on that base. Alvin Buzzy Krongard, George Tenet's XO, came directly from Wall Street. Alex Brown's and Sons was his corporation. Krongard didn't want anybody to know this, but he'd been affiliated with Wall Street with the CIA for years. And Tenet and he made it look like that was his first stint, and they just brought him in from Wall Street. Well, that wasn't true. He was associated with the CIA for years. And a few days before the planes hit the towers, Buzzy Krongard's company short sold all their stock in United Airlines and American Airlines. And in the 9/11 report, which is almost like the Warren Commission report, they didn't really want to find anything, or they mentioned there was some short selling going. Short selling meaning something's going to happen, so you sell your stock for real cheap. There were some companies that short sold stock in the airlines, but we found nothing there.
Same with like Larry Silverstein, who purchased the insurance on it just 6 weeks before. It's incredible.
Yeah, and we found no trace that Al Qaeda had funded it. Buzzy Krongard's not mentioned because he was the one that his company short sold those stocks, but it's stuck way down in a footnote in the 9/11 Commission report that there was this company and blah, 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 blah. Well, that's in our book.
Now, which company was this?
This was Alex Brown and Trust, which was later bought by the Deutsche Bank. Buzzy Krongard came over acting like he was only making $1 for service of his country, when in reality he made $71 million off the sale from Alex Trust and Sons to Deutsche Bank. Before he came with the CIA, he was a multimillionaire, but he claimed that he was doing it for a country. And it was Buzzy Krongard that went after me when I uncovered that vulnerability and ordered this CIA IG and I named the name of the IG person at the time, to personally attack me. I was approached at an offsite. I was a program manager for Department of State after that. And the former senior IG official that was there when they were ordered to destroy me had retired, and he'd come with this company I was with. He comes over at this program manager conference, and he sits down, and I knew him. His name is Larry. I can't give his last name. Larry goes, "Kevin, I need to talk to you." I said, "Yeah." Larry goes, "Listen, I was on the IG when your case hit. We were ordered to silence and destroy you. This is a CIA IG." He said, "I just wanted to apologize for what they did to you." And I said, "That's great, Larry. I wish somebody would have done something before, because my family was really sick." So just a witness that they did.
Reminding you guys that you should be drinking 7 Weeks coffee. Why are they called 7 Weeks coffee? Because at 7 weeks, a baby is the size of a coffee bean, and it's the same time a heartbeat is clearly detected on an ultrasound. That's why they donate 10% of every sale to support pregnancy care centers across the country. They've raised over $500,000 for these centers, and they've saved over 5,000 lives. Now I can tell you about their coffee because I'm very picky about what I put into my body. It's mold-free, pesticide-free, shade-grown, and low acid, and it's organically farmed, so it truly checks all of the boxes. And just in time for the holiday season, 7 Weeks Coffee is having their biggest promotion of the year. You can enjoy exclusive discounts, free gifts with every order, and new limited edition coffees. So whether you're looking for stocking stuffers or the perfect roast, 7 Weeks Coffee has you covered this Christmas season. Exclusively for my listeners, if you go to 7weekscoffee.com and use code Candace, you'll get up to 25% off your order. Remember that your order will directly help support a network of over 900 pro-life organizations across the U.S. It's interesting to realize how severely propagandized those agents have to be to realize you're working for an agency that is sending you out to destroy somebody who has worked for this agency, which means they're teaching you loyalty that they are not ever going to reciprocate to you.
Yeah, that's right.
And that doesn't come online for these agents. I think about that all the time as I'm unpacking all of these things and what the CIA has been involved in. And, I was even speaking to a guy about the moon landing and how many people got killed, very bizarrely died in mysterious circumstances. And you just wonder when you see these agents, like, when does it come online? You're not a part of them. Like, there is a very small elite who realizes that if they make you think that you're in the cool club, that you'll do anything for them, that you'll put your lives on the line. But to them, to the people at the very top, they'll replace you tomorrow. They'll kill you tomorrow. You're as good as you can serve them today.
Yes.
And it's just interesting to hear that they were sent to go destroy a CIA agent, as if they weren't CIA agents.
I was a top
I would
performer.
go, I'm working for the wrong place.
Yeah.
If you're asking me to destroy someone that's a colleague.
Yeah. And
For what? Because he tried to save other colleagues.
Yeah, and he's exposing this base that we've been trying to hide for decades, and all kinds of bad stuff that they'd buried there. And I'll tell you, the 20%, the top 20% of the CIA, especially at the highest levels, they're malignant narcissists. They do not care about human life. Now, the 80% below, there's a lot of good, patriotic, America-loving people just doing their job. But the 20%, that's where the darkness and the evil is, because they do not believe in democracy at that level. And they could care less about the Constitution, obviously, because they break federal law all the time. They broke it in my case several times. So it's that top dark 20% that are doing the same things they've been doing since MK Ultra was initiated. And MK Ultra was in place for 20 years. That was not a short program.
I think it's still in place.
Well, you got to ask yourself, why would Thomas Crooks take a shot at Donald Trump? And you look at his background, of course, it's under investigation, so they're not going to release. But this guy had 3 encrypted overseas bank accounts, which I haven't heard anybody investigate that. He had no history of criminal violence, no threats. He was a brainiac in school. He'd received an award as an honor student. Of course, he was in a BlackRock commercial, but in my opinion, that was just a coincidence because they were bright students they were interviewing. But this kid had no history, no inclination to do that, and yet one day he climbs up and does that. Then there's Sirhan. And both Bobby Kennedy and I are absolutely convinced that Sirhan was an MK Ultra. A program by MK Ultra. He had no memory of shooting Bobby Kennedy Sr. And when they went in to hypnotize him, they said he was so easy to hypnotize, they had him climbing up and down the walls like a monkey. They could make him do whatever they wanted, and he would do it. That's just the way his mind was. Like, it had been really badly messed with. So I think Bobby Kennedy and I are convinced that was an MK Ultra subject too.
Yeah, I'm very convinced that he was obviously murdered. And somebody also was telling me, someone on the PBD podcast was telling me there's actually a book that's super interesting, that it wasn't even him being stabbed that killed him. It basically, and one of the things that you also learn in this Chaos book, which is the same, which is that there are corrupt medical examiners. And after people die, he was telling me that there was an injection that went into his neck and that killed him instantly. So there's always a lackey, and then there's supposed to be someone that makes sure that the job gets done. And so that's one. I haven't had time really to explore that death, but Tehran, I really want to look into that. But it's very likely. You can always tell in the manner and the swiftness that they lock down an investigation and want the media to move on. Because why would the media move on so quickly from someone trying to shoot President Donald Trump if it wasn't because we were going to find who was implicated was going to be the CIA? And I also was stunned by how every network was covering that rally. Like every network who hates Trump was there that day and was covering it. And I think about that now when I think about these sort of mass psychoses that is supposed to come out of these events. If everyone's watching and he's speaking and then he gets shot on camera, and then afterwards, what they already had ready to go, they said, Iran did this. Do you remember this?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm like, what? Thomas Crooks and Iran? Like, come on.
We received intelligence from Iran
that they were going to do it.
Baloney.
Yes, of course it's baloney. Are you? Oh, so this random kid was really hooked up with the Iran regime.
CIA propaganda.
Absolutely. And I'm thinking, does anybody believe this nonsense that Iran had anything to do with this? Like, this is the state trying to take out Donald Trump. And I'm going, please, Trump, do not accept that. They are obviously have trained this kid. And it's funny you remark on him being a brainiac because a lot of these, and I'm blanking on his name, and maybe one of you guys can tell me, the Connecticut shooting, the school shooting that was horrific, Adam Lanza was another one of these brainiac kids, and the FBI paid him a visit after he was able to hack into their computers when he was really young, and they said, well, you may work for, the FBI one day. And it's, and I don't know if it's alleged or if I actually read this in a mainstream media article, that he was visiting Yale often, and we know, like, what was he doing? So he gets a visit early on because he's a brainiac. Next thing you know, and you can see in his eyes, he looks drugged out of his mind.
Oh, absolutely.
And so these are the questions that I would have thought years ago was a conspiracy until I really learned about what the MK Ultra program was. I mean, we're talking even attempts to turn someone into a psychopath by sexually assaulting them when they're young, sodomy, all of these things. Our government did this.
Yes, they did. They did. They used sexual violence. They used torture, putting them in frozen rooms, hanging them. They used extreme amounts of LSD, extreme amounts of electroshock. The original idea was they were trying to create assassins that would go kill somebody and then have no memory of the event. Sirhan.
And also John Lennon, the night that he was shot, the CIA was there that night.
Yeah. And these normal, average people, successful, many times intelligent people, just go out and do these horrific things with no prior warning or indicators behaviorally at all. And then with Adam Lanza, you look in his eyes, and some of these people's eyes, and his brain was on. He'd been on something for quite a while. I mean, that's pretty clear. He'd been driven mentally insane, and that's what Ultra was designed to do, to train criminal killers, but who would not remember what they did, and to train couriers as mules who would courier information over to intelligence agencies and then forget the information that they were just given. Also to do that, and then to do enhanced interrogations even way back then. And the torture program was not just waterboarding, by the way, but to do enhanced interrogations back then. And that's what MK Ultra was all about. From Jolly West Lewis, he was the chief of psychiatry at UCLA, and denied any involvement in MK Ultra, which was developed by Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, who was the madman of the program. And Jolly Lewis, Jay West, he went by sometimes. West claimed that he had nothing to do with MK Ultra, and he would sue anybody that said that he did, and up until he died. Well, Tom O'Neill did a superb investigation where he went to UCLA and found West's notes and records that UCLA hadn't gotten rid of yet, and he went through them meticulously, and he found correspondence between Dr. Sidney Gottlieb and West about MK Ultra and how they were going to try to hide it and try to move it out in the field, and made that connection right there.
Shocking part of the book.
Yes, and in Haight-Ashbury, Jolly West Lewis had his MK Ultra office right next to Haight-Ashbury Clinic, and they would refer people over, and some of the people that O'Neill interviewed that were involved in Hayasbury said, "Oh yeah, Manson and the girls came to see Mr. West often, all the time," and then they go out and do this horrific murder that's beyond imagination. Come on, I think he really hit on a big truth there.
No, he did. And that's why I say you have to read this book, because it really, you really have to confront how evil our government has been and therefore is, because they have not, it's not like there was some mea culpa. We did this and we're sorry. They just keep these things up and they keep gaslighting us and they keep pretending that these people are one-off Looney Tunes. And then you realize that there is some connection with an MK Ultra program, or the government had visited them, or they were brainiacs.
Exactly.
You really, really have to understand what the MK Ultra program is. And so it completely changes the way that I view all of these events, because I don't view them as random at all.
It should.
I know that they want us to view it as random. And it's so interesting to see as more and more things get exposed. You know, we have the Diddy case, and all of the same elements are in everything. Drugs, people not remembering things, feds are somehow involved. In the Diddy case, they're saying, you know, he had a number that he could call. This was being alleged by the person who brought the lawsuit forth and really exploded things, that the LAPD, very similar to Charles Manson, there was a person that was working for the feds that could just make things disappear, and they could rely on the media to lie about things that were happening.
Yeah.
Shocking, I'm going, but not so shocking once you realize this has been going on at least since the 60s.
Oh, yeah.
And so that also brings us into the Jeffrey Epstein thing.
I was about to mention it.
Yeah, so the Diddy is kind of like the Hollywood of the Jeffrey Epstein, which is something the media worked very hard to bury for a very long time. And the most compelling part of the Jeffrey Epstein thing is how they just sort of released him and allowed him to live in his house at first. And when questioned about this, what's his name? Acosta said, I was told as a judge
he was intelligent,
that he was intelligence, and that is the reason I could not prosecute him. So there was somebody above me who said I could not prosecute this asset.
That's right. That's right.
What are we to make of that? What do you think about Jeffrey Epstein?
Epstein was a CIA Mossad asset that was recruited and was doing a blackmail operation. I think that's crystal clear. No question about it. So
tends to be the party guy, just like Diddy.
Drugs,
cameras, drugs.
The CIA, as part of MK Ultra, had Operation Climax, where they would lure Zhongs in with drugs and prostitutes, and then this drunk CIA schmuck would sit on the opposite of a two-way mirror and take notes on what, you know, just evil, wicked stuff. And that's what they're using Epstein for, was blackmail operations. And they got some pretty high-level people snared into that. And they haven't released the entire list of close Epstein confidants, but you know, Israel's former prime minister was one of them.
Which prime minister?
Bahoud. Trying to remember. You'll have to check it. I'm drawing a blank on his name. Bahoud something. They got a
Barak?
Yes, they got a picture of him visiting Epstein at his New York apartment. And he was well connected to Epstein, but that was all in secret. And that is the intelligence part of Mossad. And of course, they couldn't do that without coordinating with the CIA. So
I ask this question now, the more I learn, there just always seems to be this connection between the CIA and the Mossad. And I'm going, is it just,
no,
they're the same organization? I think the more you look back into history, and it's always somehow the CIA and the Mossad is there on the day that JFK gets shot. We learn about like MLK, we learn about 9/11, and I'm just going, okay, why does it seem like there's a union here, a marriage here?
Mossad is like the sister of the CIA. They're joined at the hip, kind of like Siamese twins, and they use each other for intel and operations and things like that. They are extremely close and in an extremely sensitive relationship. Oh, yeah.
And it totally explains what Epstein was doing. And also Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell, when he died, and didn't he die rather mysteriously? I'm not sure.
He fell off. He found dead off his yacht, floating in the water. They claimed it was a heart attack.
Of course.
Just when he was coming under scrutiny for arms dealing and connections with the CIA and being a Mossad agent, actually a double agent with Mossad and KGB. All of a sudden, he's found dead floating next to his yacht, you know, and...
happens all the time.
Oh, yeah. It's just, just one of those things. See what...
But a ton of Mossad agents, and I think a former prime minister of Israel attended his funeral. So it's like, guys, hey, maybe...
It's like, you know, it's very difficult that they find out the hard way to cover up the truth, because it's going to leak out, you know, somewhere. And it's good investigative journalists and people like yourself that look for those leaks and then start digging, which is what we have to do, because we're being lied to constantly. Our government has not changed since Pearl Harbor. It is the same. The CIA is the same at the upper levels. They're doing the same kinds of things. I was an agent on William Casey's detail, and one of my posts was in his house. And just underneath where he was sleeping, and we were protecting him, and Khomeini had a price on his head. So we were intimately next to William Casey there and in his office, and when we were driving in the motorcade. But none of us knew that Casey had done an operation to kill a suspected imam by planting a car bomb outside the mosque and setting it on a timer. Well, the imam that they claimed was a terrorist came out near the car bomb, but one of his patrons asked him a question. So the imam turned around to go back, but the timer was already set. Bomb went off, killed 64 women and girls at the girls' school, and it turns out it was the wrong imam. Well, Casey was doing that. We were living in his house. We didn't know because we weren't up in that 20%. That's what I'm talking about. That's where the darkness is. And when, thank God, Bobby Kennedy's in there now, and I hope the Trump administration now will start hacking away at that top 20%. And in Twilight of the Shadow Government, I call, me and Kent, for reform of the CIA and removal of that covert operational power that it has to conceal what it's doing through secrecy.
I'll tell you one thing, the last Kennedy that wanted to shatter the CIA
I know.
did not live to tell about it. So.
They are in extreme danger, not just in the United States, but from global powers, both Donald Trump and Bobby Kennedy, without question.
Mm-hmm. And I think it really is waking up the masses to this so people understand this and don't think that these events are random.
Yeah.
That offers protection to them in many ways, knowing that that you're not going to run the same Operation Mockingbird and try to tell us that a random person tried to shoot Donald Trump. Like, we are going to speak about the truth. And you always know when you really have arrived at the truth because of the way the media attacks you.
Yeah, right.
And the way that I've seen the media, once I started getting interested in this and the media attacking me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm banned from Australia. I'm like, I've never committed a crime in my life. How do you get banned from a country you've never committed a crime in your life?
That is so
and it's
ridiculous.
just like, I'm on the ADL's list, and I'm going, okay, it's because I'm telling the truth. And when you start speaking real truth to power, of course, the mockingbirds don't like it. No. They are sent down to try to destroy
intentionally.
You. Yeah.
Especially you, because you're coming out with the truth unvarnished, and there's no question about that. And of course, they've done the same thing with me, conspiracy theorist, rogue, CIA employee, paranoid.
Totally crazy. We worked with him for years, and we thought that he was so intelligent that he was a part of the 2%, but now he's a wacko.
Yeah, but now he's a rogue wacko. Yeah. You expect that, and we should consider that a badge of honor.
I do, and that's why, look, I even put it on. I'm like, conspiracy theorist, I sell it. I couldn't care less. That. I'm like, yep, you got me. I know that you created the term, and we're going to go ahead and embrace that because we know exactly what you're up to.
Yep.
Okay, so now we have to do this thing, and I'm going to ask you, and by the way, we're not putting this to be fact, but like after I spoke to Judge Joe Brown about MLK, and he was the judge in the case, and he was then being attacked by the feds. They shot into his house 15 times. Crazy for him to be telling the background of that. And he was like, this is how they killed him. The FBI killed him. Here's the gun they used. They kept the guns. And it was incredible to hear him say this on the show. But now we're going to go back in time, and I'm going to ask you who you think did each of these huge events, okay? The killing of MLK Jr. We are told that it was this random guy who happened to have a couple of extra passports on him that day. Yeah. Is he the murderer of MLK Jr.?
No, that was a CIA operation because they considered him a dangerous communist. And both the FBI was bugging in churches where he was giving some of his speeches in churches. They were bugging the podiums and following him around. He was a top target for elimination. So, and what the CIA does, is CIA specifically, and sometimes the FBI, there's always a boogeyman. There's always one person. Well, this person did. Osama bin Laden did it, so let's move on. We got him, so it's over. They always have one person that's their MO. That's a scapegoat. We got him. The whole operation is over. We solved it. Now, forget about it. And that was the case with Martin Luther King. Same MO. They used that same MO over and over and over. Timothy McVeigh. He was the only one that did it.
About that. Timothy McVeigh. Yeah, he was MK Ultra.
And there were other bombs in the building that were reported initially and then deleted from the media coverage, and on and on and on we go.
Okay. JFK. We are told that this guy just shot him, and then another guy heroically shot the guy who shot the guy. And then, as you learn in the Chaos book, was visited by Jolly West while he was in prison, and then he was suddenly insane the next day when the judge saw him. Who was involved? Do you believe the official storyline of how JFK was killed?
Absolutely not. For starters, have you read the book The Secret Team by Fletcher Prouty? Oh, I would recommend that book to everybody. Fletcher Prouty had high-level access in Department of Defense and CIA tickets, but they forgot to get him to sign a non-disclosure agreement. So when he saw all this, how they played all these things, he came out and he wrote The Secret Team. And in The Secret Team is his witness account of the JFK assassination. And there was a well-known CIA operator from Vietnam up until that point named Edward Lansdale. And there's a photograph of the three mysterious men being walked by the sheriff in front of the book depository. And walking by them, as one of them smiled, was Edward Lansdale, well-known CIA operative. And proud he worked with him. He knew what he looked from behind. He knew about the ring on his finger. And he identified Lansdale as a CIA operative. George Bush made this mysterious phone call that day, claiming that he was in Dallas. Now, George H.W. Bush, longtime CIA operative, although he tried to deny it. He going all the way back to the Cuban Missile Crisis. He was a CIA operative. And when he was president, CIA in the White House, aka Iran-Contra, and then they promoted him. So Edward Lansdale was there. There's no question about that. Bush called in and said, I think something may happen today, and I don't know. I just wanted to warn you about it. I'm in Wisconsin or wherever he said he was. He was in Dallas, Texas, and phoning in a fake phone call that day. Oswald, without question, had been recruited by the CIA, sent over to Russia to try to be a double agent, and then came back. Was he the only shooter? Absolutely not. The CIA was then working with the mafia, and JFK had fired Allen Dulles, the devil incarnate, as we've called him. And Allen Dulles, he fired Allen Dulles. So Allen Dulles was having secret meetings with other CIA officials that were now out of there, how to get rid of JFK, because he was his arch enemy. He fired him. This guy was a power-hungry director. So they were having meetings on how to get rid of JFK rather. And so when the murder happened and the Warren Commission was put together, guess who was in charge of the Warren Commission?
Allen Dulles.
Allen Dulles, who coached all the CIA witnesses what to say, what not to say, and forbade some of the others from even testifying at all. They put the Fox in charge of the hen house. I mean, come on. And then the questions they asked, as you know, were just absolutely ridiculous. So, yeah, I think that was a CIA hit, and they may have employed some mafia connections to carry it out because that was their mafia assassination program.
Exactly, and LBJ was very involved in all that in Dallas. And so
he was an evil man.
He was an evil man. I believe he knew that he was going to get shot because they wanted him in the position, because they wanted to go to war every single time. When they decide they want war, and what did LBJ do? Henry Kissinger, that they just went to town. In Vietnam, went to town in Cambodia. I mean, they just didn't stop. The murder of Americans, not realizing that this is how things work. Okay, what about Pearl Harbor?
Pearl Harbor, Admiral Ace Lyons. I don't know if you've heard of Admiral Ace Lyons. I had a radio program called The Intelligence Hour several years ago, and Ace had become a friend of mine because we were working on exposing Benghazi. And Ace Lyons was commander of the Pacific Fleet back during that time. And I asked Ace Lyons about Pearl Harbor, and he goes, I am still angry to this day. And I said, why? He goes, because they knew the attack was coming. They knew where it was going to happen in Pearl Harbor and when. And they told no one, and they let it happen on purpose. That's from the commander of the Pacific Fleet. I would say that's a pretty credible witness. So yeah, that was a false flag.
They've admitted that. They admitted they heard it was going to happen, and how else were you going to get Americans to be on the side of this war that had nothing to do with us?
Exactly, and that MO is repeated on and on and on and on and up through Iraq, where the Pentagon even had the Pentagon Analyst Program, and they were going on Fox News, and all these generals that were recruited in this propaganda effort, going on pushing the Iraq war. You remember on Fox News and others, there were these generals on promoting. Well, that was a propaganda operation by the Department of Defense called the Pentagon Analyst Program. So
this is why you have to learn about Sigmund Freud, and then behind him Edward Bernays, and learn about the World War II propaganda. Make people every day just see Germans as the enemy. Then we have this big event happen, and the boys sign up and they go to war and they get killed, and it is the exact same thing every time. Remarkable intelligence failure. Now we're being drafted in because we have a right to defend ourselves, and we must get involved now with this war that has nothing to do with us. And now we're in the Middle East, which is nowhere near us, but we're. And so, which brings us to 9/11. Your opinion? My
opinion, as a criminal investigator, as a former CI officer, 9/11 was not the act of a bunch of poorly flight-trained terrorists that executed an unbelievably meticulous piloting of those aircraft. Even pilots, there's pilots for 9/11 Truth now, and they say we could not have done that. Experienced pilots could not have made those maneuvers. Not possible. And then we go to the passport issue, and we go to the Tower 7, which was a controlled demolition.
Obviously.
You talk to any structural engineer, and I have. Well, that was a controlled demolition. I mean, it was perfect. And then you look at the facts that just don't add up, and the facts that were left out of the 9/11 Commission report, and then the ridiculous claims they made, the lack of airplane parts, no landing gear, no engines, which we talked about. So all of that put together, and the fact I think George W. Bush blacked out, I think it was 40 pages of the 9/11 report dealing with Saudi Arabia. And the report came out, the 9/11 Commission report came out, but those pages were blacked out, and he refused to unredact them. So wait a minute, this report was supposed to be for the American people on what happened, and you blacked all these pages out? What in the world? I do not think that it was a bunch of poorly trained or untrained terrorists that did it. I think there was another source behind it. I think it was intentional. And I'm going just from a criminal investigative perspective, just looking at the evidence, what evidence we have, that was an intentional act. And it would fall right into the MO that you and I are talking about, horrible event, because human life does not matter to the shadow government deep state, or especially the CIA. It does not matter. They're pawns on their chessboard. They don't care that 3,000 people were horribly killed that day, but it achieved the aim of gutting the U.S. Constitution, bringing in the horrific Patriot Act, giving the CIA unthinkable authority for secret prisons and torture beyond waterboarding and secret renditions and all of that. The FBI, the ability to spy on Americans, came out of the Patriot Act. So it was the perfect national security state energizer that the Patriot Act was, and 70 of the congressmen and senators that read the Patriot Act didn't even read it. They just signed off on it without even reading the bill. So, yeah, I mean, that's my view. And it's
my view as well.
Just factually.
The economy has been a major burden on the average American. Wages are flat, expenses are up, and it is very hard to manage to pay all the bills without using credit cards. If you're a homeowner and you're frustrated with that cycle, I need you to make a 10-minute, no-obligation phone call today to my friends at American Financing. Interest rates are finally coming down. So if you're constantly carrying a credit card balance each and every month with a rate in the 20s, American Financing can show you how to put your hard-earned equity to work and get you out of debt. Their salary-based mortgage consultants are saving their customers an average of $800 a month. And if you get started today, you may not even have to make next month's mortgage payment. So call today at 800-795-1210. Again, that's 800-795-1210. Or visit americanfinancing.net/Owens. Again, that's americanfinancing.net/Owens. Yeah, I mean, you look at these things and you go backwards, and you, like I said, it just follows that same MO every single time. Horrific event, and then yelling at everybody, don't even ask any questions of what we do next. If you do, you're a terrorist sympathizer. You know, like all you care about is defending the terrorists in the Middle East. You don't care about your safety. And I think there was just one lone congressman who said we absolutely should not be signing the Patriot Act. And you know, the media came down on him very hard. How could you have this perspective? 3,000 Americans have been killed. Again, that emotional conditioning to make us not even think about actually the probability that it's just an evil government that is willing to kill people to further its imperialistic aims, whatever that may be, whether it's they want oil, whether they want more land. And so I'm hopeful that people wake up to this, because now that I am very aware of this pattern, now that I have confronted the evil of our government, I am deeply fearful, as you said, for Kennedy and Trump, and recognizing that if you're talking about coming up against the deep state is quite the enemy to come up against, because they have killed presidents, in my view, and they will kill as many Americans as it takes to retain their power. And I think we have the right team to do it. I think even having it be Kennedy, with the history of the Kennedys, and Trump and his ability to just keep going. Like,
it's remarkable.
It is remarkable that we really do have this chance. And at the same time, people waking up to what the mainstream media is. So Operation Mockingbird is failing. Which for the first time, it doesn't work anymore. So they can keep that operation going. It's good for business for me.
That's right. It is. So, I mean, it's so encouraging.
It is. It's very encouraging. And so now you can hear them starting to have the conversation of, we've got to get a handle on these podcasters with their misinformation. And
let's go ahead, make our day.
Make our day, because the people are awake. Okay. Give everybody the name of your book and where exactly they can find it. Guys, this is a must read. You absolutely must read this book.
It's called Twilight of the Shadow Government: How Transparency Will Kill the Deep State. I wrote it at some risk because the CIA blacked out redacted information in my last book, From the Company of Shadows, that was unclassified, violation of Executive Order 12356. It's a felony. And so I knew that in this book, they were going to either redact the majority of the revelations that we write about or sit on it for a couple of years. So I gave it to the CIA and let them have it for 3 months. There's an old law that said they have to get it back to you in 30 days. They'd never abide by that, based on constitutional freedom of speech, but they never abide by that. So I let them sit on it for 3 months. And after 3 months, Kent Heckenlively, my courageous co-writer, we said, all right, they asked me for approval. Can we send it to the publisher? And I said, do it. So we sent it to Skyhorse and published it before the CIA approved it. And it's the only way I could get this out. I took some personal risk, which I'm glad to do because it's so important. We don't know what the CIA is going to do, whether they're going to try to take my royalties from the book, which they usually try to do. I mean, I've already been threatened, poisoned, broken into. It's like, whatever, but someone had to take the risk to do that finally, to expose what the CIA is.
Where can people go to support you, aside from buying the book? Like, is there anywhere people can go to just support you in general? Because I just think that when you see someone like this, who's actually it's funny that you say Skyhorse published it, because when my producer first said, do you want to get this guy on? I instantly went, okay, is this going to be a limited hangout? A limited hangout is when, like, you know what I'm talking about? The CIA allows people in the CIA to come out and pretend. And then when I saw that Skyhorse was publishing, I said, oh no, this means that they, like, the publishers will not publish his book, and he has to go to a more independent type of publisher, because I'm dealing with that same thing. I'm not allowed to publish my book anywhere. Even though I had a New York Times top-selling first book, they basically go, oh no, this girl can't be published anymore. So when I saw that, I said, no, this guy's the real deal. They're obviously closing doors on him intentionally.
And I violated my NDA. And no CIA officer ever done that.
We got to support you, and we got to make sure people know your name, know what you're doing, and so anything shady happens to this guy, we all know who did it. But where can people just go to support you in general?
Well, there's my YouTube channel, Kevin Ship 1, and most of my videos there are free. I'm on Twitter now, X. It's at Kevin_Ship, and I post things about this regularly. Or they can find me through Skyhorse. And the book, Twilight or the Shadow Government, is a mission for me. I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep my royalties. I have some...
If not, please start not a GoFundMe, Give, Send, Go.
Yeah.
And with a Christian company, Give, Send, Go, and we will support you, because I'm like... we are, and it's just funny that you're Christian, because I have just felt this is the Christ is King year, and Christ is truth, the way that you must just follow the truth and be willing to face the consequences. I have done that this year. And it's just funny to hear your background story. Oh, my life got saved because people were praying over me. I left the CIA because a woman randomly said, do you know about Jesus Christ?
Yeah.
And here you are. Yeah. And you realize why you were saved when you were young.
Yes.
Why you were chosen to go through CIA. You weren't chosen by the CIA. I believe you were chosen by the Lord to do that.
Yeah.
And because he wanted you to see it up front so that you could have, you would be able to speak to the public about what we are actually confronting. And you have survived the poison. I mean, you've got like a lot of lives going on here, a cat.
Yeah.
And so in every capacity that we can support people like this, you guys, I am like, we've got to do it. This is what the people that are just trying to tell the truth. So if you do start a Give, Send, Go, if they try to take your royalties, please email us. We will be the first people to be like it. And that's what I've done. I'm knocked off of YouTube. I can't make any money on YouTube. And so we turn to locals, and people, $1 a month, $2 a month. The people are doing this. We exist because of the people.
That's the way to do it.
It's the best way. I don't care about the publishers. I don't care about any of that stuff, because
it's the only way to do it.
We are creating a network of people that know that Christ is King and that the truth wins in the end. And we just have to keep going.
My wife Sue has set up a GoFundMe page, so we'll see what happens.
Go to Give, Send, Go, please.
Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah, tell her to go to Give, Send, Go, and if you send it to us, we will.
Will do.
Tell people to support you guys, and they will. Trust me, my audience, they're hardcore.
Awesome.
They don't care what the media says. They actually like it. Like I said, if the media calls you a conspiracy theorist,
that's awesome.
They're like, we can trust them.
And they probably will come after my royalties. I know that in advance. Whether they're going to try to say there's something classified in this book, let's get them for that. Well, I was a classifying authority. I know what's classified and what's not. They can try to make that accusation. I don't think they will, because there is the possibility that they don't want publicity for this book, because no CIA officer has ever done this before, and it does not make them look good. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to include the link to his book below. We're going to hope and pray that they don't take his royalties, but if they do, who cares? Because we are bigger than the CIA. We are.
That's right.
That is the reality. There's more of us than there are of them. And hopefully there are some CIA agents watching this that are getting the clue here. Like, you're working for people that don't really care about you. So why don't you join the people, join the freedom, join the truth movement? Kevin, I cannot tell you, it has been such an honor to have you.
Same
Like,
here.
these are the conversations that just enrich me, enrich my audience, help us to learn and grow, and remind people that the truth team is winning.
That's
Like,
right.
I really do believe
Amen to
that.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks
Thank you
for
so
having me.
much.